Alright, here we go. Part 3. In the last section, Advanced Topics, we're going into routing and directions. That's pretty fun, and it's something that can often balloon into much more complex projects. Some of the most complex projects out there revolve around good routing. If we think about Uber, or we think about analytical tools that minimize people's routes to work and that kind of stuff, how many people use Google Maps for directions? That's probably the primary use. So routing and directions is very, very important. And there's a lot to learn here, so I'm just going to go over a few just little things I've run into over my time working with this. Now there's a lot I could actually say. I've built quite a complex routing application, although I built the front end, not the back end, but with a company called Taro Routing. It's quite a complex optimizer. And then there's many types of different directions. So if I was going to just talk first about directions, since I know a little less about that and therefore have less to say, directions, you need to carefully pick the API you're going to use, especially if you're going to deal with a country that isn't one of the major Western countries. The major Western countries have pretty good directions, especially if you're looking for things like data on transit, like how to get places involving transit, different types of directions, not just driving, but maybe walking, biking, transit, all these different types of directions that people sometimes want. Depends on a lot of data being made available to the different services. And that is not as great in some places. I believe China has a lot better than they were a few years ago, but it's increased in difficulty because Google tends to have the best directions, and if you're avowedly not using Google, then you're stuck with either quite expensive proprietary ones or kind of somewhat substandard different plugins. That might be out of date. I would advise checking everything that's free, of course, but just saying that might be a problem you run into with certain directions if you're doing more complicated work. When it comes to routing is something that is quite complex mathematically. It depends on what you're doing, of course, but if you're trying to take, say, a few different people that need rides and figure out the best ride share, like route that reduces driving time, that can be fairly complex and involves a fair bit of complicated calculations on the back end. And a lot of time people underestimate this. They just say, oh, just make it so it gets the fastest way, but without really understanding, it's not just a straight line. There's different routes. Those routes have different speed limits. There's different traffic estimates. You can really get into a huge bevy of different types of details when it comes to routing. And depending how complex you want to be, you can go more or less down that road. When it comes to my front-end experience with routing stuff, it's not as complicated. It's a lot of polylines and just making really good user interfaces that allow the user to see different routes clearly and select them with ease. I would advise, checking out Taro Routing if you need a little more on just how to display some routes for different drivers. All right. So let's head out to Leaflet Routing. So I was just looking here in Leaflet JS, back in our favorite website here, all in the plugins section, and we have a whole area here that has to do with routing. I can't for some reason see it. There it is. Alright, so we got all kinds of different stuff. So Leaflet Routing Machine is at the top for a reason, but there's many others. So, there are a few that recommend particular use cases. For most situations, Leaflet Routing Machine is going to handle it beautifully. So let's just open this up, because it's nice even to encounter. It's well documented. That's always very valuable. They have this whole interface that builds out. Their example is quite easy to set up. You can see it's set up right there. Boom. Just a few things that we would drop into our page. So why don't we go ahead and do that? Alright, so we have just some code here set up with basic stuff in Leaflet. You know what, let's get even more basic. Let's just find their example in the most simplified style. Okay, so we have our getting started, tutorials page. Let's head to the tutorials page. Let's go to the basics. Boom. And here is some code for us. We'll just take that. Oh, it looks like we need to grab this zip. There it is. We'll just grab that zip there. And right here, grab that code. You can open that right up. And let's see here. So we got a bunch of different examples and stuff. Okay, here's an example. Let's just drag it in. Alright, here we go. So we're loading it up and we see some directions, and we can even see that there are multiple routes outlined here, and if we click on them we get the selected route changes, which is pretty fantastic. So that's just built right in. Really nice. You can also add more waypoints, which is quite valuable to be able to do. You can also drag around these different markers and then recalculate. So you do need to get used to using it a little bit, and that can be an issue for your users. So you may want to, in some cases, build out a slightly different interface. So let's go in and look at our example that we just downloaded there. And examples, index. Alright, so it's just got, just a bunch of code that leads to other code, so I think we have to look a little more. Let's find what it's referring to here. So we have Leaflet Routing Machine.js and index.js should be in here. Here we are. With the routing control, it's quite easy to add. All we had to do was include the script tag, and boom, there we go. And we include the waypoints here, so that's our first 2 points. And then we have to give it a particular geocoder, because in order to get back what is basically an address here, we need to be able to turn these points into an address. And so in this case we're using a free one, which is called nominatum. I think that's how you call it, pronounce it. And it's a great one. I mean, we're going to talk about that a little more when we're just doing like places, autocomplete and stuff like that. But that's a great geocoder ahead of time. So in this, I'd recommend using that most of the time. You can see here we have a few options: route while dragging, reverse waypoints. That's basically letting us reverse it back and forth. Show alternatives. That's letting us have more than one. And then some options for the lines that follow a lot of our familiar polyline kind of styles and that kind of thing. Now we have really good API documentation here. So if we head into the router control, we can see all these different options here. So one of the easiest ways I've found to get this working, if we just want to remove this, is honestly just to do that. So just remove it. We just go, okay, we don't really want this leaflet thing going on here. So let's find out where the container is. Looks like it is the leaflet routing container. So I'm just going to hide this, actually. Display, no, okay. Let's reload that. And there we go. Now we have just this directions. We can drag that around. Now let's find out how to hook into the event when we get back directions. Alright, so this route's found, and what we're going to do is just add this as what we need here to add as a method. So we're going to say onRoutesFound. Sorry, as an event handler here. So we have this events found. We could console log. Let's see what we get when we have this. Might be routes. Let's just see what we actually end up getting. Alright, let's reload and open up console. Okay, it already loaded, and that makes sense because it already shot through. So we have routes, targets, waypoints. Okay, routes looks good. We have one and then the other. We might restrict it to just one. And it has summary information. Let's take a look at that. Instructions, summary, total distance, and total time. Okay, cool. I wonder what that time is in. Probably in seconds. That looks like it was about, what was it, 17 minutes or something like that. Let's see. So in total distance, it's probably in meters. So we will access that and show, and we'll just at least console log out some of that information. Direct summary dot total distance, great, and total time. And I guess that would be seconds and meters. So if we wanted to find feet, then we're going to have to do just a little bit of calculation. Oh, looks like we got an error there. Did we write something in wrong? Let's see here. Let's just refer to the waypoints here. Oh, no, to the routes themselves. Oops, my bad. And this should, of course, be here. So let's see if we got that right here. So now you know, with your skills of interface design, you could easily output that, and you could have it update dynamically as we go along and get new results. So that's just a little bit about routing. It's going to be a lot more, and feel free to message me if you need specific help on some instructions or some particular math. See you in the next episode.